Good afternoon, everyone. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Gayatri Lele. Dr. Lele is a visiting faculty for International Relations and Area Studies for MA at Department of Political Science, Ramnarain Ruia College, Mumbai. She presented her doctoral thesis titled Identity, Nationalism and State Policy, Case Study of Nagas in December 2021 at University of Mumbai. Ma'am has co-authored and published several research papers, and she has also participated in several seminar presentations at national and international universities. She was a part of state-level committees like Balbharati and Marathi Vishwakosh Mandal. Her articles and columns are frequently published in various popular Marathi newspapers. Now I'd request Gayatri ma'am to make her presentation.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Dr. Sanjot Apte, for inviting me to such a vibrant festival that I am witnessing today. Unfortunately, not since morning, but I'm sure the students must be enjoying over here. I have been asked to speak about internal security challenges in Northeast India. As you can see on the slide, in this particular session, I am going to focus only on Nagaland and Manipur, because covering an entire northeastern region is not really possible in 40 minutes. But obviously we can have a discussion later on. Not that I am expert in every state of Northeast. I can't even claim to be an expert in Nagaland and Manipur even after doing a PhD, because it is such a complex issue and something that has been the conflict and the problems over there has been continuous in nature. मला मराठीतूनही बोलायला सांगितलेलं आहे, तर मधून मधून मी मराठीत स्विच करेन. PPT तुम्हाला हेल्प करेल काही गोष्टी समजून घ्यायला. तर फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल वी विल स्टार्ट विथ overview of northeastern region. Again, we can just talk about overview of the entire region for like 35 minutes, but obviously we are not going to do that. सगळ्यांना माहिती आहे की हा एक 8 राज्यांचा समूह आहे, पण प्रत्येक वेळेस 8 राज्य मानलं जाईलच असं नाही, कारण त्याच्यात सुद्धा वादविवाद आहे. इट इज नॉट ॲट ऑल अ होमोजिनियस रिजन. आपल्याला मुंबई आणि पुण्यातून दिसताना सगळं कदाचित एकसारखंच दिसतं किंवा खूप आसाम सेंट्रिक आपल्याकडे एक्सप्लेनेशन आहे, डिस्कशन आहे, बट इट इज नॉट सो. एव्हरी स्टेट इज डिफरंट. द पॉप्युलेशन देअर इज व्हेरी डायव्हर्स इवन इंटरनली. So even for example in Nagaland, all the Naga communities are not the same. There are 16 official tribes in Nagaland, and apart from that there are many sub-tribes. They are so different from each other. They don't even speak the same language at times. मराठी आणि मल्याळम भाषांमध्ये जेवढा फरक असेल तेवढ्या 2 नागा सबट्राईब्समध्ये लँग्वेजेसमध्ये फरक आहे. तर this diversity is quite unimaginable for people like us. I am saying people like us because we are so far from the region and not really well acquainted. That's why they are popularly referred as 7 sisters. Nowadays they have been referred as Ashtalakshmi, including Sikkim in the entire discourse, but that particular term is also debated, especially by the northeastern scholars. सो त्याच्यात एकमत नाही आहे. टुरिझममध्ये आपण सेवन सिस्टर्स सप्त भगिनी असं म्हणतो, बट त्या खरंच भगिनी आहेत का, आर दे रिअली सिस्टर्स, इज अ क्वेश्चन दॅट इज टू बी आस्क्ड. It is diverse and complex, different political dynamics, culture, social, economic structures from the rest of the country, something that I have just mentioned. The region, entire region, has faced problems ever since independence. So, we don't really focus on the northeastern part of the region. When we talk about the post-independence India, you will see that more or less every region has faced some or the other problems like isolation, backwardness. They have been deprived from various resources, the struggle for living. They are geographically also in a very tricky terrain. So that has culminated into violence, something that is to be termed as internal security challenge ever since independence. In this particular session, we are going to see how that particular challenge has been tackled by the Indian state by using various methods. It's a twofold conflict with the Indian state and within the regions. I should note over here that with Indian state हा जो फिनॉमिना आहे तो दिवसेंदिवस कमी झालेला आहे. So insurgency over there has dropped by significant number, and it has been a result of the years of negotiations and peace building that has been happening in these regions. Internal security challenges, that is the reason why is insurgency, ethnic conflicts, border conflicts within themselves has been a huge issue. आपण या सगळ्या याच्यावर एक एक लेक्चर ठेवू शकतो, पण परत कधीतरी आपण बोलू यावर. Armed Forces Special Powers Act has been, AFSPA has been used as a tool to securitize this region, also to curb insurgency, but it has not been devoid of kind of controversies that it has gone through. AFSPA has also been reduced from many regions of the northeast. So that's a थोडासा mention in, even on AFSPA we can have a different session, but this is not the time to do that, but I will touch upon few of the things. That's why it is usually said that dynamics of borders and boundaries produce particular identities and politics over there. Borders आणि बाउंड्रीज ह्या इतक्या तिकडच्या आपण आखून दिलेल्या काही बाउंड्रीज आहेत नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न रिजन्सना, पण त्यांच्यात काही सीमारेषा आहेत, त्यांचे त्याविषयीचे काही प्रॉब्लेम्स आहेत जे त्यांच्या अस्मितेशी जोडलेले आहेत. त्यामुळे आपण फक्त त्यामुळेच विचार करताना द प्रॉब्लेम डझंट रिमेन कन्फाइन्ड टू मणिपूर अँड नागालँड. It might go beyond, because Manipuri and population in Nagaland, both in Nagaland and Manipur, they are not confined just to the states of Nagaland and Manipur. नागा आणि मणिपुरी वेगवेगळ्या ज्या मेती, कुकी इत्यादी एथनिक ग्रुप्स आहेत, ते हे दोन राज्य सोडून बाकी सगळीकडे नॉर्थ ईस्टमध्ये जवळजवळ सगळीकडे तुम्हाला दिसतात. त्यामुळे बॉर्डर्सचा इश्यू सोडवला की आपण लोकांचा इश्यू सोडवू शकतो, हा अप्रोच नॉर्थ ईस्टमध्ये चालणार नाही. दिस अप्रोच इज व्हेरी जेनेरिक, something that we may implement in the mainstream kind of India that can't be implemented in the peripheral regions. Mainstream आणि periphery या सुद्धा खूप वादग्रस्त constructs आहेत. What is to be called as mainstream आणि what is to be called as periphery? परिघावरचे प्रदेश कुठले आणि मुख्यधारेतले कुठले, हा सुद्धा एक वेगळा, मला वाटतं तो तर एक सोशॉलॉजिकल डिबेट आहे, तोही आपण खूप घेणार नाही आहोत. बट स्टील दिस डिबेट इज सर्टनली देअर. क्विकली लोकेटिंग द नॉर्थ ईस्ट. नाउ दिस मॅप इज नॉट एट ऑल प्रपोर्शनेट, आय नो इट इज बॅड, बट जस्ट टू लोकेट द region, if in case people do not have an idea about it, but I'm sure students here have an idea as they are keenly listening to this particular session. You can locate 8 states: Arunachal, Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura, Sikkim. So these are the things to be remembered always. Nagaland म्हटल्यावर कुठे विचारू नका, it is very much a part of the Indian state. And you can see how strategically important this region is. It connects our nation state to the rest of the eastern part of the world. So it borders 96% of the border is bordering with the other nation states. मग बांगलादेशची बॉर्डर जवळ आहे, आपल्याला भूतानची आहे, म्यानमारची आहे. सो strategically it has been very important, which is realized by the way by the Indian state. That's why we have policies such as Look East policy, which has been converted into Act East policy. कुठेतरी तुम्ही ते शिकलेलं असाल तर त्याच्यात सुद्धा जेव्हा आपण या सगळ्या साऊथ ईस्ट एशियन कंट्रीजकडे बघतोय तेव्हा आपण नॉर्थ ईस्टला सुद्धा त्यामुळेच खूप इम्पॉर्टन्स द्यायचा प्रयत्न करतोय. अँड दॅट्स वाय अकॉर्डिंगली द इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेव्हलपमेंट हॅज बीन देअर. Or the peace negotiations with warring groups, you will see that they have been developing and state is taking keen interest in it because this region is very much strategically important. इंटिग्रेशनच्या दृष्टीने सुद्धा प्रयत्न चालू आहेत. मी इंटिग्रेशन म्हणते ॲसिमिलेशन नाही. ॲसिमिलेशन टू द मेन स्ट्रीम इज नॉट अ गोल, शुडंट बी अ गोल. बट इंटिग्रेशन म्हणजे काय, त्यांची आयडेंटिटी कायम ठेवून त्यांना आपण मुख्यधारेत कशा पद्धतीने आणू शकतो. दिस इज ॲक्च्युअली अ क्वेश्चन अँड इट इज अ क्वेश्चन दॅट वी आर डिलिंग फ्रॉम द इंटरनल सिक्युरिटी पॉईंट ऑफ व्ह्यू ॲज वेल. आय एम जस्ट, दिस इज अ व्हेरी not a very well constructed slide, but it is just to show you how the communities in Nagaland and Manipur particularly were always against integrating into the Indian state per se. And they faced, so these are the two memorandums submitted by two of the Naga and Manipuri groups, one in 1929 and one in 1949. These memorandums are available online, but it is just to understand how these ethnicities always felt isolated and different from the entire Indian state per se in the beginning. Now that has also changed by the way over the years, because it has been 75 years of independence. So you will see that this particular feeling of isolation and deprivation has reduced over the years, and that also should be somewhere noted as success of this integration program that we have been having. सो हे खूप इंटरेस्टिंग डॉक्युमेंट्स आहेत, जिथे एक नागा क्लब नावाचा एक ग्रुप होता नागांचा. नागा म्हटल्यावर लोकांना काहीतरी नाग रिलेटेड वाटतं, तर तसं काही नाही आहे. नागाज आर द जेनेरिक कॅटेगरी दॅट वी ॲड्रेस फॉर द पीपल इन नागालँड. दे देमसेल्स माइट नॉट रिफर देम ॲज नागाज. दॅट्स अ ट्रिकी पॉईंट. तर त्यांचा अंगामी, आओ नावाचे असे वेगवेगळे ग्रुप आहेत. They will necessarily call themselves Angamis and not the Nagas. So त्यांची जी सबट्राईब आहे त्याच्यावरून स्वतःला आयडेंटिफाय करणं हे त्यांचं वैशिष्ट्य आहे. In this you will see one is submitted to the Simon Commission and one is submitted to the United Nations. Now this seems quite लावे, यावर हसू शकतो आज आपण, because it did not really, it has signs of only 70 members. याच्यात सुद्धा हे मेमोरंडम सबमिट केलं तेव्हा खूप कॉन्ट्रोवर्सी आहे की नेमकं ते कोणी साईन केलं, कुठल्या एथनिक ग्रुप्सने साईन केलं वगैरे वगैरे. इंटरेस्टिंग पार्ट असं की दोन्ही याच्यात ते असं क्लेम करतायत दॅट वी आर डिफरंट फ्रॉम द मेन स्ट्रीम. वी हॅव अ राईट टू प्रिझर्व अवर कल्चर. वी आर अफ्रेड ऑफ एक्सटर्नल फोर्सेस एंटरिंग इन टू अवर सेटअप अँड कॉलनायझिंग अस. सो द मेमोरंडम इटसेल्फ इज titled as Memorandum for Decolonization of Manipur State, and the timing is quite 1949 when we were struggling actually to integrate the state of Manipur. Naga memorandum to the Simon Commission is submitted much earlier. मी हे दाखवलं अशासाठी की खूप कष्ट आहेत अशा पद्धतीच्या पॉप्युलेशनला आपण आपल्या देशामध्ये कसं सामावून घ्यायचं आहे. हा जो प्रश्न मी सुरुवातीला मांडला, दॅट इज ॲक्च्युली अ प्रूफ ऑफ इट. सो वी हॅव कम व्हेरी मच अहेड ऑफ दॅट पर्टिक्युलर डिस्कोर्स. नाव इफ यू आस्क द यंगर नागाज फॉर एक्झाम्पल, they will have different opinion about it because they haven't seen bloodshed in their life, but their generations, past generations have seen it, and somewhere that particular struggle is also there internally in these states. I can talk from Nagaland. I haven't done field research in Manipur, but still while talking इथे बोलताना मला असं वाटलं की दोन्ही आपण हे स्टेट्स घ्यावेत, ज्यांच्यात कदाचित काहीतरी सिमिलॅरिटीज आहेत, पण आणि आत्ता कदाचित ते वेगवेगळे प्रॉब्लेम फेस करतायत, बट द पाथ समवेअर हॅज बीन सिमिलर. पटकन नागालँड आणि मिझोरम यांच्यात काय नेमके, आणि त्याला आपण इंटरनल सिक्युरिटी प्रॉब्लेम्स का म्हणतोय. नागालँड मधली इन्सर्जन्सी, व्हेरियस इन्सर्जन ग्रुप्स, इन्सर्जन्सी ऑल्सो इज नेव्हर होमोजिनियस. फक्त एक प्रकारची इन्सर्जन्सी असं नाही आहे, त्याच्यात सुद्धा वेगवेगळे ग्रुप्स आहेत, वेगवेगळ्या विचारसरणी आहेत. But the motive somewhere more or less was to challenge the Indian state and demand for Nagalim. Now their submission has always been very interesting. ते असं म्हणत राहिले की आम्हाला नागांचं सेपरेट राष्ट्र नागालिम नावाचं हवं, पण त्याचा अर्थ असा नाही की आम्ही भारत सरकारला काही हानी पोहोचवणार आहोत. आम्ही तर आमचा हक्क मागतोय, तुम्ही नंतर आलात, आम्ही आधी आहोत. सो दॅट claim of being original inhabitant of the region, it somewhere still lingers. I'm saying lingers because it is not as fierce as it was back during the time of getting independence. म्हणून नागा इन्सर्जन्सीला मदर ऑफ ऑल इन्सर्जन्सी म्हणतात, कारण the first internal security challenge from the northeast, I think, was the Naga insurgency. Immediately after independence, the series of insurgencies started with the Nagas. At that time, the state of Nagaland was not there, by the way. It was made created later on in 1963, which also helped us to somewhere curb the insurgency over there. Colonial roots for the demands for independence आपण ते पाहिलं. नागा क्लबची स्थापना 1920 सालीच झाली होती. त्यामुळे एक ऑर्गनाइज पद्धतीची नागा मुवमेंट नेहमीच अस्तित्वात होती. त्यांनी ब्रिटिशांनाही बऱ्यापैकी क्वेश्चन केलं फ्रॉम टाइम टू टाइम, आणि नंतर इंडियन स्टेटला सुद्धा. नागा क्लब वॉज नॉट द ओनली ऑर्गनायझेशन. यू हॅव सेव्हरल, आय एम नॉट रिअली गोइंग टू नेम एव्हरीबडी, बट मेजर वन्स हॅव बीन नागा नॅशनल काउन्सिल, NNC, नॅशनल सोशलिस्ट काउन्सिल ऑफ नागालँड, NSCN. मला माहिती नाही तुम्ही यातलं नाव ऐकलं आहे का, हे ऐकलं नसेल तर तुम्ही त्यांची वेबसाईट सगळं त्यांचं अवेलेबल आहे. NSCN ऑल्सो हॅज मल्टिपल फॅक्शन्स. आणि जेव्हा आपण अजूनही इंडो नागा, त्यांच्या मते जी इंडो नागा आहे, आपण तसं म्हणत नाही, आपण एक पीस प्रोसेस असंच म्हणतो त्याला, in that NSCN has been one of the party. So all these groups were fighting for this cause of Nagalim. नॅशनल सोशलिस्ट काउन्सिल ऑफ, अजूनही म्हणताना ते नागालिम असं म्हणतात कधी कधी, बट द ऑफिशियल नेम हॅज बीन नागालँड, बिकॉज देर इज नथिंग called as Nagalim exist today. Creation of, as I said, Nagaland state somewhere curbed that insurgency. The not curbed totally, but somewhere they could limit it to certain extent. त्याच्या आधी 1958 मध्ये आर्म फोर्सेस स्पेशल पॉवर्स ॲक्ट तिकडे लागू केला गेला, AFSPA. And it was again mainly to curb the insurgent movements over there, which was necessarily posing threat to internal security. AFSPA still persists in many parts of the northeast, but it has been reduced significantly, especially from Manipur and Nagaland, which is contested, by the way. But the long-standing demand for the reduction of AFSPA somewhere has been heard by the Indian state. Just last year, the decision was taken that they will reduce it from multiple regions. That's why I have mentioned over here the question of human rights violence was constantly highlighted by the northeastern people because of AFSPA. And the first people who went to the court against human rights violation were the Nagas. And it was called as Naga People's Convention, who went to the court of law to assert that human rights violation happened within the region and they should be addressed by the state. And various then cases were filed against the human rights violations that were happening within because of AFSPA, to which the state did respond. And last year, that's why it was also stated as very commendable for this Indian state to actually reduce it from several regions. Relative peace after ceasefire in 1997 असं मी लिहिलंय, कंटिन्यू स्टील डेट. रिलेटिव्ह पीस म्हणजे आधी जेवढा व्हायलन्स आणि ब्लडशेड या सगळ्या प्रदेशाने पाहिला होता, 1997 मध्ये आपण एक सीजफायर त्यांच्याशी अग्रीमेंट साईन केल्यानंतर it has been reduced, and that ceasefire agreement also is renewed year after year. So just last year they renewed the ceasefire in order to again, it is to protect the state, it is to make peace with the warring groups, and also to make sure that no more bloodshed and violence is there. In 2015, the framework agreement has been signed between Indian government and Naga leaders. तुम्ही एक गुगल केलं फ्रेमवर्क अग्रीमेंट तर असा एक फोटो एक फेमस आहे जिथे वेगवेगळे नागा ग्रुप्स with the prime minister and the president and other people from the government. They signed this particular agreement, which was considered to be a stepping stone in the entire process. याचा एक USP म्हणावा लागेल असा होता की वेगवेगळ्या ग्रुप्सना आपण एकत्र आणू शकलो. दॅट वॉज सीन ॲज अ सक्सेस ऑफ दिस पर्टिक्युलर अग्रीमेंट. Nevertheless, it is criticized as well for keeping it classified for a longest period of time. The peace process that started later on, ती सुद्धा खूप सक्सेसफुल झाली आहे का तर त्याला खूप सक्सेस आपण पाहू शकलोय असं नाहीये. NSCN, which is involved in the entire process, has been raising multiple doubts and also criticism on the government. तर अशा अनेक गोष्टी याच्यात इन्व्हॉल्ड आहेत ज्यामुळे ती पीस प्रोसेस खूप सक्सेसफुल आहे असं नाहीये. Nevertheless, I should repeat the fact that the insurgency in Nagaland overall has been reduced. It is noted that in 2020, I suppose, 80% of less issues were reported of insurgent violence compared to 2014. म्हणजे 6 वर्षात जवळजवळ 80% व्हायलन्स आपण ओव्हरऑल नॉर्थ ईस्टमधला कमी करू शकलो आणि दॅट इज सीन एज समवेअर द सक्सेस. बट द पाथ इज एंटायर थिंग इज स्टिल इन द प्रोसेस. इट इज टू बी मेन्शन्ड अगेन अँड अगेन. Now Manipur is a very complex kind of terrain, and only on Manipur actually we can again conduct the entire session. It has been in the news for a while for the ethnic conflicts between Meiteis and Kukis. I hope students here are aware. कारण अनेकदा पुन्हा नागालँड मणिपूर कुठे आहे तिथपासून प्रश्न असतात. पण the entire state suffered a lot in last 6 to 7 months. So it is mainly because of Meiteis and Kukis. But again, the conflict predates independence. So Kukis आणि नागा हे नेहमीच एकमेकांशी युद्ध करत राहणाऱ्या जमाती राहिलेल्या आहेत. आता याच्यात नागा कुठेच नाही आहेत या सगळ्या याच्यात. नागाज आर ॲक्च्युली ॲक्टिंग ॲज पीस मेकर्स बिटवीन 2 communities, but there is animosity between Kukis and Nagas as well, and obviously Meiteis and Kukis. Now हे खूप ॲक्च्युली तिढा आहे तो एक प्रकारचा. मेती हे मायनॉरिटी आहेत, कुकीज हे मेजॉरिटी आहेत, कुकीज हे मायनॉरिटीज आहेत. And they are also different religion wise, they are also different ethnicity wise. It is also sometimes seen as conflict between Christians and Muslims, but it is not the only angle through which we see at this particular ethnic conflict. There have been militant groups. Now what is important for the internal security perspective discussion is that every ethnicity has their own militant groups. So you have militant groups of Meiteis, you have Kuki groups, you also have Naga groups functioning in Manipur. So हा जो NSCN group आपण पाहिला जो नागालँडमध्ये प्रायमरीली पण तो मणिपूरच्या एकूणच परिघात सुद्धा कार्यरत आहे. And that is also discussed as a major internal security threat. Now what has happened because of this ethnic conflict that is by the way reduced in past 1 month or so. Internet shutdown somewhere continues. Often internet is restored in between, but then they again shut it down because of security threat. झालं याचा त्यातला एक प्रॉब्लेम की तिकडे सुद्धा मणिपूरमध्ये जे इन्सर्जन ग्रुप्स होते There is someone called UNLF, United National Liberation Front, किंवा People's Liberation Army, PLA. हे सगळे ग्रुप्स बऱ्यापैकी डॉर्मंट झाले होते आतापर्यंत, बिकॉज द पीस ट्रिटीज हॅव बीन साइन्ड विथ दीज ग्रुप्स ॲज वेल ओव्हर द इयर्स. Now the fear is that there will be resurgence of these insurgent groups, and people are also suspecting that they are being the part of the crowd, part of the fight between ethnic groups, and that may pose challenge to the overall security of the state. Fear of external interference exists, and this is a very serious issue. So just 3 days ago, this was actually one of the major national news that would have become in last 3-4 days. There is a region called Moreh, town called Moreh, MOREH, in Manipur. And Moreh is known for kind of illicit trade with Myanmar, because it is very much closer to the Myanmar border. तिथे झालं असं की मोरेमध्ये बरेचशी घरं आणि काही असेंब्ली हॉल्स आणि काही शाळा यांना आग लावण्यात आली. नाउ इन ऑर्डर टू somewhere deal with this fire, somebody called forces from Myanmar, and they actually crossed the border to with fire extinguishers to हे काय ते फायर सगळी आपली हे करायला, म्हणजे अग्निशमन दल बाहेरून आलं. आता दिस इज अ व्हेरी कॉन्ट्रोवर्शियल थिंग वेअर द सप्लाय इज कमिंग फ्रॉम द अदर state by crossing the boundary, and the villagers there started saying that if they wouldn't have been there, the entire village would be ablaze. So they were claiming that the internal police actually did not act, and we had to call the external forces. Just today morning when I was reading for the lecture, the Ministry of Home Affairs actually had to take a note of it, and they have sent the 3 of their members, panel of 3 members to Manipur, and they will now stay in Manipur in order to examine this particular issue, because such crossing of boundary can become actually a threat. There is also fear that because of the conflict that is still in a way going on, again it has been reduced, but we can't say what will happen anytime in Manipur. त्यामुळे होतं असं की इन्सर्जंट ग्रुप्स माइट गेट पुश टू म्यानमार अँड दे विल ऑपरेट फ्रॉम देअर. इट हॅज हॅपन्ड इन द पास्ट इन केस ऑफ नागालँड वेन NSCN-K ओव्हर देअर इज फॅक्शन कॉल्ड NSCN-K. मी त्याचं सगळं सांगत नाही इतिहास, पण तो म्यानमारमध्ये आहे आणि ते तिकडून ऑपरेट करतात. नाउ दॅट हॅज ऑल्सो बीन कन्सिडर्ड ॲज अ मेजर इंटरनल सिक्युरिटी थ्रेट. Major security threat because of the internal issues that we have been having. So this fear of external interference and internal violence is very much persistent in the state of Manipur. There has been many problems with peace talks that they have been having with different warring groups. So in December 2023, the government tried to forge a peace talk with this group called United National Liberation Front, UNLF, and it was considered as a welcome kind of a gesture, because there is a place in Imphal where they actually celebrate all their major occasions. So it is known as Kangla Fort. सो तिकडे ती पीस ट्रिटी सगळ्यांसमोर साईन केली गेली. बट देन मेनी ऑफ द नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न स्कॉलर्स एस्पेशली आर रेझिंग क्वेश्चन्स ओव्हर दीज ट्रिटीज. सो वॉट दे आर बेसिकली सेइंग इज इट इज नॉट इनफ. सो ओनली वन फॅक्शन फ्रॉम UNLF which is maybe near to the government is signing the peace treaty, but the other factions of UNLF are not really included. Now the government is saying that we will include other groups eventually. We have to wait how is it done, and whether all these groups agree to come on one negotiating table. Non-talks factions still they are holding the demand for Manipur's sovereignty and different administration, etc., which are also the challenges that we are facing today. There have been demands for sovereignty and autonomy even from the Kukis and also from the Nagas in Manipur. And if now the question before the government is if they fulfill one particular demand of a one particular ethnic group, असे अनेक एथनिक ग्रुप्स आहेत ज्यांच्या सिमिलर डिमांड्स आहेत आणि हा प्रश्न नागांच्या बाबतीतही आहे. त्यामुळे इट्स इझियर फॉर अस टू से दॅट दिस क्वेश्चन शुड बी रिझॉल्व्ड मे बी ॲज सून ॲज पॉसिबल, बट लुकिंग ॲट द डायव्हर्सिटी ओव्हर देअर अँड ग्रुप्स दॅट आर हॅव्हिंग conflicts within themselves, it is not really easy to actually implement any policies over there. तरी आपण असं म्हणायला पाहिजे we have come so much ahead in this particular process, पण तरी सुद्धा तिकडचे प्रॉब्लेम असे एका झटक्यात संपणारे नाही. तर त्यासाठी पीस प्रोसेस ऑल्सो नीड्स टू बी व्हेरी मच डायव्हर्स इन इट्स अप्रोच. And also should listen to the voices of the locals. Even after listening to that, there will be multiple problems, and I think people have to be really patient about everything. Manipurचा आता असं आहे की we need to wait how this entire peace process actually proceeds. But right now, people have been pointing at the problems with the peace talks, especially with these warring groups. One more thing has happened. While signing a treaty with NSCN, Nagaland, NSCN ही बरीच वर्ष बँड ऑर्गनायझेशन होती, बंदी घातली होती पूर्णतः बिकॉज द क्रॉस बॉर्डर इन्फिल्ट्रेशन वॉज बियॉन्ड द लिमिट. बट वाईल टॉकिंग विथ NSCN they lifted a ban on NSCN. आता इकडे टॉकिंग विथ UNLF the problem is the ban has not been lifted overall. So people are raising questions on that as well. Now again the state side is if they really uplift the ban, what will happen next is something that we cannot predict, especially in this particular volatile situation. So that has been a problem in ensuring overall peace and security within this particular state. इन अ नटशेल आपण नक्कीच असं बघू शकतो की आत्ताच्या घडीला मणिपूर इज मोर difficult issue to handle as compared to Nagaland. So that's why in a nutshell we can say that both states are affected by ethnic conflict, existence of armed groups which has been there. So थोडंसं मी या स्लाइडवर प्रयत्न केला आहे की काहीतरी सिमिलॅरिटीज आणि डिफरन्सेस आपण दाखवू. दिस इज नॉट टू बी डेल्ट लाईक एन एक्झाम. ते काय आपण परीक्षेत लिहितो जसं आपण 2 ग्रुप करून लिहू नाही शकत की काय सिमिलॅरिटी आहेत आणि काय डिफरन्सेस. बट एक जनरली जर हे समअप करायच्या आपण वाटेवर असू तर एक जनरली आपण बोलू शकतो बोथ स्टेट्स हॅव हॅड एथनिक इश्यूज, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स, एक्झिस्टन्स ऑफ आर्म्ड ग्रुप्स, implementation of AFSPA has been there, and as I said, it has been uplifted as well. It has been reduced in the last year. Now the problem is, I really read an interesting news where a discussion was going on in last April. Discussion झालं ते AFSPA सुद्धा they extended from year to year. So AFSPA जर तुम्हाला एखाद्या प्रदेशात आणायचा असेल तर तुम्हाला तो प्रदेश डिस्टर्ब्ड एरिया म्हणून घोषित करायला लागतो. अँड इफ इट इज नॉट अ डिस्टर्ब्ड एरिया देन द AFSPA can be uplifted. The process is quite long, but this is not a place to explain it. झालं असं की नागालँडमधून आणि मणिपूरमधून बऱ्याचशा प्रदेशात AFSPA नाही आहे. बट आता असं झालं आहे की 2 त्याच्यात व्ह्यू पॉईंट मला दिसले. एक आसाम आहे. आसामने अशी डिमांड केली आहे की उरलेल्या तिथे सुद्धा थोड्या प्रदेशांमध्ये AFSPA आहे, उरलेल्या सगळ्या प्रदेशांमधनं AFSPA कमी करा, घालवून टाका. पण ऑन द कॉन्ट्ररी मणिपूर हॅज आस्क्ड फॉर AFSPA. They have stated that the internal security situation is quite grim over here and we require an army. Now this is again a narrative this is a statement actually by the state government to be followed for next few months maybe, how the things take turn domestically and it will decide the security policy over there. Challenges काय आहेत before the state? लँड हा तिकडचा सगळ्यात मोठा प्रॉब्लेम आहे. आय डोंट वॉन्ट टू गो इन द डिटेल्स ऑफ इट, कारण आसामपासून सुरुवात केली तर हजारो प्रॉब्लेम आपण आत्तापर्यंत फेस केलेले आहेत. आय होप दॅट कोणाचं तरी मॅडम लेक्चर ठेवा आसाममधल्या NRCवर सुद्धा, इन विच लँड वॉज हॅज बिकम द इम्पॉर्टंट इशू. सगळीकडेच बाउंड्री इश्यूज असतील किंवा डिस्टिंक्शन बिटवीन हिल आणि प्लेन एरिया असेल, सगळीकडे लँड इश्यूज आहेत. आत्ता मणिपूरमध्ये हिल प्लेन कोणाला माहिती नसेल तर मेइती आहेत ते प्लेन ट्राईब्स आहेत, म्हणजे जमिनीवरच्या चुकीचं भाषांतर आहे, मला माहिती नाही तर मराठीत काय म्हणायचं. हिल म्हणजे डोंगराळ भागातले, कुकी, नागा हे सगळे डोंगराळ भागात राहतात. तर डोंगराळ भाग आणि मैदानी प्रदेश असे डिव्हिजन तिकडे सगळीकडे आहे. अर्थात मणिपूर पुरता पाहायचं झालं तर कदाचित मैदानी प्रदेशातले ज्या ट्राईब्स आहेत त्या मे बी कम्युनिटीज आहेत, नॉट नेसेसरीली द ट्राईब्स. दे आर मे बी मोर डेव्हलप्ड दॅन द पीपल अँड इन द हिली रिजन्स. इट इज नॉट होमोजिनियस एव्हरीवेअर. पण हे एक अशा प्रकारचा डिफरन्सेस, अशा प्रकारचा फरक तिथे आहे. तर त्यामुळे लँड इश्यूज हे सगळ्या नॉर्थ ईस्टमध्ये आहेत. त्यामुळे ते कसे सोडवायचे हा एक तिढा आपण अनेक वर्ष आहे आपल्यासमोर. द प्रॉब्लेम ऑफ इलिगल मायग्रंट्स फ्रॉम म्यानमार अँड बांगलादेश. इट इज व्हेरी डिफिकल्ट टू डिटर्मिन द इलिगल मायग्रंट्स अँड इट इज ॲक्च्युली अ प्रॉब्लेम. इतक्या पोरस बॉर्डर्स आहेत. तुम्ही, आय डोंट नो वेदर यू हॅव बीन टू बांगलादेश बॉर्डर, अँड इवन द बॉर्डर दॅट इज ओपन फॉर द टुरिस्ट, इट सीम्स इट इज सो पोरस. एनिबडी एंटर असं होत नाही. पण द थिंग इज दॅट इट इज व्हेरी डिफिकल्ट टू डिटर्मिन ॲज वेल हू इज कमिंग फ्रॉम आउटसाईड, अँड दॅट हॅज बिकम अ रिअल प्रॉब्लेम. मायग्रंट्सचा इशू, बांगलादेशी लोकांचा एकूणच इशू हा सगळा NRCमध्ये सुद्धा खूप डिस्कस केला गेला. त्यामुळे तुम्हाला इंटरेस्ट असेल तर तुम्ही हे कुठेही वाचू, ॲम्पल मटेरियल अवेलेबल आहे, वाचू शकता. uneven development within the region which we have dealt, we are still dealing with it. काही रिजन्स खूप चांगले जोडले गेलेले होते मेन स्ट्रीमला, काही रिजन्स नव्हते. बट देर हॅव बीन, यू विल सी इन लास्ट 15 to 20 years there have been proliferation in एअरपोर्ट्स किंवा रोडवेज बरे केलेले आहेत, रेल्वे थोडीशी पोचवायचा प्रयत्न केला आहे. बट इफ यू हॅव एव्हर ट्रॅव्हल्ड इन द नॉर्थ ईस्ट, तुम्हाला असं कळेल की दिस इज अ डिफरंट वर्ल्ड वेअर वी रिअली हॅव टू फेस हॅसल वाईल ट्रॅव्हलिंग. आणि कधी कुठली अडचण येईल सांगता येत नाही. तुम्ही रस्त्यात एखाद तास असेच अडकून बसू शकता बिकॉज ऑफ लँडस्लाईड ऑर सडन रेन्स. व्हेरी डिफिकल्ट टेरिन ओव्हरऑल टू डील विथ. सो हा एक प्रॉब्लेम तिकडे राहिलेला आहे. डिवाइसिंग इफेक्टिव्ह वेज ऑफ प्रोटेक्टिंग द मायनॉरिटीज विदिन द ट्राईब्स. हे कसं करायचं याच्याकडे आपल्याकडे डेफिनेट अजूनपर्यंत उत्तर नाही आहे. टॅकलिंग विथ देअर सस्पिशन अँड ओव्हरऑल फिअर टुवर्ड्स इंडियन स्टेट हॅज ऑल्सो बीन अ प्रॉब्लेम. अँड समवेअर in that process of integration, that is the reason why we had to use the way of negotiations, and the use of force alone was not enough. So AFSPA was seen as a tool through which maybe state tried to implement the force, but negotiations were the way through which they could actually talk to the groups who had demands on the ground. And were they successful always? असं सक्सेस मेजर नाही करता येणार प्रत्येक टॉकचं, बट इव्हेंच्युअली द रिडक्शन इन इन्सर्जन्सी, वन ऑफ द रिझन्स इज द कंटिन्युअस टॉक, दॅट कंटिन्युअस काइंड ऑफ अ डायलॉग दॅट वी आर हॅव्हिंग ऑन विथ द पीपल ओव्हर देअर. Withdrawal of AFSPA, I just mentioned, there are problems with withdrawal where Manipur state is again demanding the implementation of AFSPA. From Nagaland, no such demand has come. You must be aware of the violence that happened 2 years back in Nagaland, and the way the state responded to it was quite different than how is it doing in the previous year. So I think for the first time they recognize that okay, human rights violation happened and we should take a strict action regarding if in case the provisions in the AFSPA are violated. तर त्यामुळे थोडं रिडक्शनने फायदा ऑब्वियसली आहे, बिकॉज दिस इज अ डेमोक्रेटिक कंट्री वेअर मिलिटरी फोर्स इज नॉट रिअली सीन ॲज अ वेलकम काइंड ऑफ form of governance. But still, there are now regions who are demanding such a protection. So how to resolve this complex issue is a problem. And how to deal with the demands of autonomy. अजूनही जरी नागालिमचा प्रश्न मागे पडलाय तरी सुद्धा काही ना काहीतरी डिमांड आहेच. अनेक नागा रिजन्स हे मणिपूरमध्ये सुद्धा आहेत. तर असे पण काही ट्रॅक्ट्स आहेत जिथे कुकी आणि नागा हे दोघंही म्हणतायत आणि व्हॉट टू डू विथ सच कॉम्प्लेक्सिटीज इज अ क्वेश्चन दॅट वी हॅव राईट नाव. अगेन इट्स अ प्रोसेस थ्रू विच वी विल हॅव टू keep on observing. This is an assembly of the students. That's why I felt including this particular slide is quite important. How social science students approach this problem overall of the Northeast. And if you are studying the security situation over there, this may help you. Nuances of local history are to be understood. And in this pan-India approach can be avoided at times. पॅन इंडिया अप्रोच काय आहे की जिथे मेन स्ट्रीम दिल्लीचा अप्रोच आहे. आपण गोष्टींना एका पद्धतीने बघायची आपल्याकडे सवय आहे, पण देर इज अ पॉसिबिलिटी दॅट यू माइट हॅव टू थिंक फ्रॉम देअर साईड. व्हॉट डू दे वॉन्ट इन निगोसिएशन्स वी नेसेसरीली डू दॅट. सो पॅन इंडिया अप्रोच इज टू बी, it can prove problematic. I'm not saying that you can't have generic policies over there, पण तरी सुद्धा लोकांचा विचार, त्यांच्या एका पर्टिक्युलर युनिक इतिहासाचा विचार हा फार महत्त्वाचा आहे. These demands of different nation is a problem that we are trying to resolve, but then not really acknowledging that they are having the demands of self-determination won't help us. So instead, acknowledging those demands, studying those demands and finding the way out is ahead. मला असं वाटतं फक्त पॉलिसी मेकर्सचा हा इश्यू नाही आहे, तर मला असं वाटतं आपण या देशाचा भाग आहोत, जनता आहोत या देशाची, त्यामुळे हे सगळं वाचणं पाहणं आपलंही काम आहे. Carefully assessing and filtering what comes and does not appear in the mainstream media, very important. Coverage on Northeast in itself is very less. And it has been there. So असं नाही आहे की ते गेल्या काही वर्षांमध्ये डेव्हलपमेंट, इट इज ऑलवेज लाईक दॅट. Nowadays, that's why there are, thanks to internet, we have an access to newspapers that are published from those regions. आसाम ट्रिब्यून आहे किंवा नागालँड पोस्ट आहे, तर अनेक न्यूजपेपर तिथून येतात, तुम्हाला ऑनलाईन ते वाचता येतील. इट इज व्हेरी इम्पॉर्टंट टू रीड देअर पर्स्पेक्टिव्ह. Having a broad approach, the problem does not remain confined to one state. हे मी सुरुवातीलाच सांगितलं की नागालँड आणि मणिपूरमध्ये प्रॉब्लेम आहे, तर तो प्रॉब्लेम इतर राज्यांवरही अफेक्ट करणार आहे. जसं की एक सिम्पल नाही आहे पण साधं एक्झाम्पल आहे की आत्ता एथनिक कॉन्फ्लिक्टमध्ये अनेक लोक डिस्प्लेस झाले आहेत मणिपूरमध्ये. त्यातले अनेक कोकी जे परिवार आहेत ते मिझोराममध्ये displaced झालेले आहेत. So it's actually a challenge for the state of Mizoram as well regarding how to integrate the people who are coming from across the border. And all these states are again geographically in a very difficult position and land wise also very tricky. So हे कसं सगळं accommodate करायचा हा प्रश्न आहे. That's why in a nutshell, listening to the local voices is the key, and we as students as well should try to do that. So thank you so much. I think I have taken 40 minutes, 50 minutes, but I hope that I could give a glimpse into the overall security situation in both these states. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for presenting us all with the various aspects of Manipur and Nagaland insurgencies. Now the stage is open for question and answer session. Please feel free to anchor your questions around the key themes and points raised during the lecture.
My question is for Ramnarain sir. So you mentioned the Naxalbari uprising of 67, and from certain other documents that I've read, China, it was also part of China's policy at the time to export the Maoist philosophy to other countries as well. So do you feel that today China can influence the Maoist movement in India in some ways, or especially in the disinformation campaigns?
Okay, yeah. So, insofar as Naxalbari revolt is concerned, and after that, I think one of the grievances Indian Maoists had was that China is not supported to the extent they would have wanted to. In fact, and this is, I'm talking about Maoist insurgency generally. Of course, we just discussed Manipur, and there is a People's Liberation Army in Manipur as well, something which has been directly supported by China, and there has been a logistical support which has been given to that, because it is geographically possible that way. But the mainframe Maoists have been slightly disillusioned by the sense of not having to the extent they would have anticipated the support. Yes, there was an ideological support which existed for a while, but I think after 70s and 80s, when China itself became an insular country, if you remember after Mao Zedong, there was a concerted effort within China to develop its economy. They started becoming insular. Deng Xiaoping essentially started with that. After that, they have not done that consciously. Later on, yes, there has been support in providing certain training to certain people. There are instances for that. That is something which China has done. Essentially on the groups which are Maoist aligned in the Northeast, that is something they've done. There is also alleged, now I want to say this is also alleged that there has been certain support in terms of certain Maoist leaders in India through different channels, could be diplomatic as well. So that has been there. Now, can China do it? I don't know, frankly, because investing in the mainframe Maoist struggle for China right now, logistically how they are going to do it is something, it's a question. But more importantly, what strategic objectives are they going to serve, except for the fact that this will destabilize India further, is I'm not sure about. So a weak ideological link exists, but it has not been a China supported movement entirely. There are packets in which this has happened.
Good afternoon. My question is for Gayatri ma'am. You mentioned about the Ashtalakshmi factor while speaking about the Northeast states. So can you please elaborate that what is really the issue of the Northeast scholars? What is the conflict exactly?
See, there has always been conflict over nomenclatures over there. So as I said, even when we say Seven Sisters, it has been accused that it is mainly a tourism kind of a term that has been discovered, and they are not really sisters. So it is not only on Ashtalakshmi per se, which is maybe is having Hindu connotation, and also some people do not agree that Sikkim is a part of the northeastern region. So again, it very much depends on from where are you talking about these things. I will narrate an incident from my own field work. So एकदा मी कोहिमाला एकांकडे गेले होते, and they were just generally inquiring whether I have been to any other northeastern states. So I was like, at that time I had been to Assam, only Assam and not elsewhere. So I was like, okay, I have been to Assam. But that lady was like, Assam, it is not Northeast. So if you, and so some people even exclude Assam from their conception of Northeast. So मला असं वाटतं, what I have concluded is, तुम्ही म्हणजे एका कम्युनिटी तिकडे सेंट्रिक एकूणच अप्रोच असल्यामुळे नागाज विल बी मोर ऑलवेज कन्सर्न्ड अबाउट देअर ओन एथनिक ग्रुप, their own village, their own kinship ties, and then they look beyond or even to their neighbors. So अर्थात त्याच्यात काही प्रकारचा जसं every society is made out of conflict and dialogue. So there has been a dialogue as well, but there has been a major part of conflict which is to be recognized. So फक्त to answer in one question, it is not just on Ashtalakshmi per se, but it has been the problem of nomenclature has always been there in the Northeast. So yeah, so as Madam rightly said, again the imposition of the yeah. Yes. So that has overall been a problem.
So it's like the big brother syndrome. Also, like the mainstream India is dominating the Northeast. So they're saying, I'm trying to brand as a but we would like to have it.
Hello. So this is a connected question, so both the speakers can answer. Was there any Maoist involvement in Mizo uprising of 1966? And if it was, is it fair to say that not Naxalbari but Mizo uprising was the first major instance of an extremist left wing or perhaps pseudo left revolt in independent India?
Mizo movement, I don't see that as a Maoist insurgent movement, because if you remember, it is one of the instances, just because you pointed it out, Mizoram is one of the instances which I think the insurgency was created because of the lack of Indian state there. If you know the kind of famine that came about and the Mizo National Front which was created, it's also the first insurgency which was resolved across the other northeastern state. There could be element of certain ideological imprint there, but Lal Denga and the Mizo National Front and all them were not necessarily ideologically motivated. They had grievances with regards to the problems that emerged because of the peculiar time in the year and the famine emerges and the lack of awareness that Indian state had. So I don't think but what you've pointed out is an interesting issue, and this is not pertaining to Mizoram particularly, but there have been Maoist influences in such insurgent movements generally. Now, for instance, Naga National Socialist Council, NSCN, which is there. Now, in NSCN in the initial years, some of these NSCN members were also had certain links with China as well. They used to travel, and they've appropriated certain such fault lines, like I discussed, that there are certain problems with the state, and you use that to propagate your ideas. Nagaland is the case. Manipur, the nomenclature itself is clear. It's a People's Liberation Army. And they have also used the local issues in order to gain the support. Something of the similar nature could have happened in Mizoram, but that's not the main frame of, which is why, and it's very interesting, when the insurgency in Mizoram was over, the Lal Denga, who was leading the insurgency, also became one of the longest serving chief minister of the state. Which is why it was easy, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Mizoram is also one of those states which is relatively less diverse. There were two major groups there. So it was more or less an ethnic issue. There could have been certain imports, but I don't see that as an insurgency per se driven by ideology.
Just one thing, equating Naxalbari with Mizo National Front theoretically also can become problematic, because as Akshay rightly mentioned, the kind of ideological element that they have over there is very much different again from the mainstream. So their idea of socialism will be very different from the mainstream idea of socialism. So equating both the incidents can be theoretically problematic. But yes, हे interesting प्रश्न आहे, which is true.
The point which he said that the socialism is slightly different. I'll just give an example of Naga NSCN. They talked about socialism, but in the initial years when the fraction was not yet developed, they talked about socialism in Nagalim, and they also talked about Nagalim for Christ. So now this is something unheard of in the socialist. When you do not integrate religious aspirations with socialist demand. Socialism should have essentially been atheist state, but this is again something which, so the ideological, I think that was an opportune way to tag all those who are coming together and fight your battle, but it can't be a mainframe socialist struggle.
Hello. So, sir, my question is to you. Sir, according to you, what do you think that international influence, to what extent contribute to the rise of Nationalism or Maoism as per se, affects the micro regions of India? Like, I belong to Chandrapur, which is closer to Gadchiroli and Bhandara, that is considered as Naxalist areas. So, how does the international influence affects the rise of Naxalism in these regions?
We just want a clarification. When you say international influence of what sort? I mean, I'm just...
Hello, yeah. Providing the fundings or economic, economic additions and that kind of things.
Yeah, I get it. So one of the peculiarities of Maoist movement, and this is, I'm talking about the general thing, there could be exceptions as well. But one of the general thing about Maoist movement in India has been that it has mostly been a local movement. So the economy through which the Maoists have been able to sustain themselves comes from extortion. Extortion of, let's say, the corporates or the state agencies. So money gets from them. The weapons are looted from the state agencies like the police or the CRPF and the others. Ideologically, obviously, they are linked. Remember, the entire, now this transcendence Maoist movement, the entire communist struggle has always been international in its appeal. If you've heard, there used to be something called Comintern, Communist International, which was to coordinate all revolutionary struggles across the globe and then provide support to that, which is Soviet Union used to do it once. After Stalin, they've stopped it. China somehow wanted to take that leadership. It also later on fizzled out. But the Indian Maoists wanted such kind of support, but I'm skeptical to what extent they were able to take it. In fact, when there was a pamphlet which Charu Muzumdar, who was one of the members of CPI-ML during the Naxalbari movement, had written an article where he said when the China war had happened, and the argument was that China's chairman is our chairman. That this is what Charu Muzumdar said, and wanted such kind of liberation movement to happen in India also, but that did not really materialize. Later on, I think that hope from an international support in the material terms like money, they could be getting certain support from certain agencies. That could be a part of it, but by and large, the movement has been sustained at the home level. Later on, essentially after 2004 and 6, they also started developing arms locally. So there were factories which were found out in Hyderabad and Chennai of rocket launchers and other things which were developed internally, not sourcing it from outside. So ideological influence has always been there. There is no doubt about it. But the material influence I'm slightly skeptical of.
So my question is for both of you. I mean, you can any of you can address it. So as we know that both Maoism and even insurgency is a bigger ideological threat, right? So as of now, if you want to influence more people, social media is the go-to place. So I want to ask that if social media, has it already, or will it bring a new dynamic into the fight against both the issues?
So it's actually a difficult question to answer, but I have seen the existence of many Naga groups on social media, but I don't really think that they are to be considered as threat right now, because what they do is, for example, NSCN IM, which is now that is not at all a banned organization. So they still celebrate their Naga Independence Day on 14th of August at various places in Nagaland. And they give this information on social media. Now, I think, see, for an academic like me, it was a useful information because it was being conducted online during COVID, and I could attend their Independence Day online. So they are using, yes, they are using social media. So I don't have a data to prove it, to what extent they have been effective, whether they are using it as an ideological project. I can't really comment on it, but yes, they exist on multiple forums. I just mentioned the incident that happened in Nagaland 2 years back. It was actually conveyed to the entire nation through social media. So I saw many Instagram posts who were talking about the violence happened in one region of Nagaland and how the civilians were killed, etc. That information also was given through social media. So it's a byproduct of many technological advancement that we have had. And these groups are going to be there on him. But as I said, I don't know whether it will have a certain impact as such on people's psyche, at least the northeastern groups.
If we can use it, someone else can also use it. It has been effectively used for propagation of an idea, propagation of an ideological. You all know that a lot of these protests were also very organically organized through social media. So I think it's boon as well as bane the way you use it. It is, and if the technology is available, it will be used, and it is being used. There are a lot of instances to know that. So I think it should not surprise us beyond the point that it is used for both the purposes, constructive as well as destructive.
Actually, I have two questions. Sir mentioned about the vanguard thing while in his speech. So in the Chinese context, the peasants were the vanguards, and there were also vanguards in the Russian Revolution. But when we look at the Maoist movement in India, and since there has been a paradigm shift after 2004, what is the context in which we look at these Maoist movements? Because they are neither solely rural, they are neither solely urban. They have become cross demographic in their nature of movements. And we also have certain remarks to certain people who are referred to as urban Naxals. So what is the context in which we look at these overall Maoist movement in the light of its ideological strength? And the second question is for Gayatri ma'am. I may be wrong, but all the discourses that we come across when we talk about these problems in Northeast India, a major part of it is that how the state mechanism has been able to deliver the benefits of policies despite of insurgencies and despite of the problems that they have been facing. So is it actually the success of the state mechanism, or is it just eclipsing the overall problems? Or how do we look at these delivering of state benefits in light of the fundamental problems that these societies are facing? Thank you.
Hello, yeah. It's a real question, so I really appreciate this question. So any state would always do that. So they will propagate certain policies, certain developments in order to maybe, as you all only mentioned, to hide maybe what is happening on the ground. So असं नाही आहे की ते आत्ताचं स्टेट करते. दिस इज द मेकॅनिझम ऑफ द स्टेट, एस्पेशली वेन दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट नॅशनल इंटिग्रेशन. तर तेव्हा तुम्हाला अनेक सिम्बॉलिक गोष्टीही वापरायला लागतील इन ऑर्डर टू शो दॅट द रिजन इज इंटिग्रेटेड. So it has been used by even Nehru, it has been used by Modi as well. So there is जेव्हा स्टेट येतं, ज्यांना एक वॉरिंग ग्रुप्स इंटिग्रेट करायचे आहेत देशामध्ये, तेव्हा सच टूल्स विल ऑलवेज बी युज्ड. Having said that, we cannot deny the success of negotiations. I totally believe in that because the dialogue has helped us a lot, even more than AFSPA. That's what I believe in. And especially in the case of the Nagas, where, as I said, the success was to bring all these warring groups on the negotiating table, which was impossible to do 10 years back. And but the thing is, again, there were problems with interlocutor, which are not discussed in the mainstream kind of thing. So the interlocutor was accused to be being biased against the Nagas, and every problem is there. So again, it has been initiated, but there are problems. What the government will propagate that the dialogue has been initiated, but are we really talking about problems? No. Then that is the task of the academicians, where they are reading about it, they are talking with the locals, they are understanding their problems. So त्यामुळे हा जो dialogue आहे तो necessary आहे. But it has been, as you said it, as you questioned, this has been a big phenomenon of every state to highlight the success of integration and somewhere then hiding the failures behind it. So yes, it has been there.
Yes, so yours is a slightly complicated question, so I'll try to declutter it as far as I can. Now you said that obviously it was quite clear in case of Lenin that the primary people would be urban industrial workers, and in case of Maoism it was primarily the peasants from the rural areas. In the Indian context, there was always a relative importance. Now, now we talk about urban nationalism as it's something new. It's not new phenomenon. It's just that it is emerging in a different light right now. Even in the Naxalbari uprising, the first Naxalbari uprising, if you look at the people who later on led that uprising, they were students, college students coming from universities, whether it is Delhi University or universities in Hyderabad. These students went and contributed to that movement. Charu Muzumdar, in fact, wanted members or students young from urban areas to participate in that movement. I don't know if you've seen that, but there's a very interesting movie called Hazaro Khwaishe Aisi. It's a very interesting take on how the Naxalbari movement was. Some of the colleges from Delhi University, students from there actually went in and participated that. So the members from the urban areas joining the movement was not unheard of. In fact, when I was studying Maoism, there was a CIA document which is now declassified, which has analyzed the entire issue from 67 onwards, and they've noted that there was a concerted way to develop and attract members from the urban areas also in that movement. What has happened later on was, earlier the focus was rural areas, because the strategy was that you will develop the movement in rural areas and then capture the cities like what Mao Zedong did. But in 2004 onwards, our assessment, if you look at the Maoist assessment of Indian state, they call Indian state as semi-colonial, semi-feudal state. Meaning that it is somewhere between rural and urban, it sort of makes somewhere between that. It's a convenient depiction to delegitimize, but that's something which how they've depicted Indian state. And after 2004, and this is something that strategy and tactics document mentions, they lament the fact that enough importance was not given to the urban spaces in the movement so far. And now there is a necessity to have a renewed strategy for the urban areas. So they lament, this is what they have written, that when they analyze the movement so far, urban areas, because of our preoccupation with the rural spaces, was not given enough importance. Now we need to give enough importance for that. Which is why you see there is a different trend after 2004, because these areas were strategically used for. And they have created organizations for that. So, for example, there is something called as front organizations or Maoist front organizations. What the purpose of this organization is to dissociate any link with the Maoist party directly. Use some of the issues like, let's say, labor issues in urban areas, student politics, caste-based groups. Use these areas, form organization based on these thematic issues, and populate your ideas through that, so that you can dissociate your link with Maoists and yet can work to radicalize the people. So this trend is far more, which is why the urban Naxal, they use the term urban Naxalism as if something new has happened. The idea is being present there. It is pursued with a renewed energy in a more recent years. That's what I can say.
Ma'am, I have a question for you, Gayatri ma'am. The traditional tribal councils or the governments that are very famous in the northeastern, for example, Nagaland has a tribal council called the Khels. So how have these tribal councils helped in the conflict resolution in the northeastern areas?
ठीक है so yes they play an important role so it's actually an interesting question again an entire session can be taken on it so autonomous district councils आहेत अनेक ठिकाणी in Nagaland particularly khels obviously are important even the churches are important so even if they church representatives are there in the peace process and churches are also confined to their peculiar villages so and they go only to those churches it works like that so they say that largely they work for peace and security of the communities and they do take part in it not at times maybe directly but their influence is rather quite there on their own communities. So it's a very well-knit society in which these councils play an important role. As I said, they may not be officially there. प्रत्येक वेळेस तुम्हाला प्रत्येक रिप्रेझेंटेटिव्ह दिसणार नाही but they do have an indirect hand in that. So it's actually a huge study. It also differs from region to region. So in Meghalaya, for example, ADCs work in a very different manner. And they also have problems within themselves. So establishing ADCs is quite a success of our constitution actually, where it is accommodating diversity through it. But even in such mechanisms there are problems. So yeah, thank you for this question.
Thank you, ma'am and sir. As we move towards the end of our session, I would request Sujal to kindly present the vote of thanks.
Good evening everyone. As we bring this remarkable program to close for day 1, I extend my sincere gratitude to all who have contributed to its success. Our heartfelt thanks to our esteemed guests for gracing this event with our presence, adding a touch of significance to the occasion. A special acknowledgement to the guests of post-lunch session, Dr. Gayatri Lele and Ramnarain sir for sharing their valuable insights and sparking intellectual curiosity and contributing to the enriching experience of this program. The success of this program is a collective effort and I extend gratitude to all our dedicated volunteers who have tirelessly worked towards making NEETIKUSHAL a grand success. Lastly, to our audience, your presence has been the driving force behind the energy and enthusiasm throughout the program. Thank you being a part of this memorable occasion. We are eagerly looking forward to seeing you all for an equally engaging second day with esteemed speakers like Vice Admiral MS Pawar sir and Dr. Samir Patil, followed by an intercollegiate quiz competition. Wishing everyone at 9:45 am. Wishing everyone a great continuation of the day. Thank you.